Alright, this is going to be a tutorial for the real-time A-button challenge, also known as RTABC. It's sort of meant for people who've probably played the game a little bit and have, watched some Panin videos and maybe some of the Bismuth videos, and are interested in giving it a run for themselves. This will be the first half of 2 tutorials. This one's going to be mostly about movement and stuff. The second tutorial is going to be more about like technical mechanics and glitches and stuff like VSC, cloning, and all that good stuff. First one, just going to be a general overview of the challenge itself and like the movement options you have. I am going to basically just be assuming that you know like the controls for the game, and that should be about it, and like the general layout of it, The courses, you could side flip, like that, just like that type of stuff. You shouldn't need to know how to speedrun the game or anything, but I guess that would probably help. And you shouldn't need to know a lot of the mechanics about the game. But yeah, rules and stuff, in general, the rules basically just mimic the speedrunning rules, so if you're confused, do that, Any version of the game's fine. N64, WVC emulator, 3D All-Stars is fine. Pretty much everyone uses emulator. In terms of version differences, there's the 3-day-long strat for WVC to get past the Poland, Bowser, and Fire Sea. Other than that, at least for now, all of the versions of the game are fine. Japanese, 1.0, or I don't think Shindu would cost anything. US, PAL, whatever. Doesn't matter, at least for now. In terms of resources, you go to the spreadsheet. The RTABC spreadsheet has all the ILs on it, names, A-press count, some task comparison, the time, who beat them. You have the second tab, which is like the leaderboard for like full game categories, stage RTAs and routes, and most of the other ones are either obscure or not very well maintained. So don't really have to worry about them. Pretty much just have to worry about the first 2 or 3. If you want to submit anything, you could put like a comment on the spreadsheet, or more commonly, you join the Discord and send a video there, and if it's good, we'll put it on there. Yeah. In general, join the Discord if you want to ask questions about anything. Should be in the description. Back to the game. Yeah, you could use a normal game. You could use Usamune for like ILs and resetting and all that. I would recommend, if you're doing like a full game run or like anything that involves a lot of A-presses, I am using this ROM hack made for Panin's 70-star bounty competition thing that he made a couple of years ago. That counts your A-presses in the top left at all times, counts everything. Maintained throughout the entire game. Really handy to make sure that you don't accidentally do an A-press when you think you haven't. You can reset it with L, although you should pretty much only do that if you're like, you shouldn't really do that in runs. It's mostly just like, resetting in case you're doing like an IL and TTC and you want to get rid of the A-press for entry. But yeah, generally, just keep it going. Really nice and handy to have. I'll leave the BPS in the description. What else about the rules? If you're just starting out, I recommend a couple good ways to start out are either doing Cool Mountain with half an A-press, A held the entire time. That's like a pretty good way to start. It has a lot of easy stars, nothing really too challenging. If you have half an A-press / A held. You can also boot up your own file and just try and get as many stars as you can from a fresh file. The theoretical maximum, at least for now, is 26 stars you can get in lobby, but realistically, if you're not looking up strats, you'll probably max out like 10 to 15. If you are looking up strats, you could probably get up to like 20 without probably get up to like 18 to 20 without a ton of effort. Yeah. Or you could just, start however you want. But yeah. I think that's overview of the challenge. Timing ends on XCam. If you're doing ILs, you can't use things that you can only use in a course after you've gotten the star. So like the main example is you can't use the owl to collect top of the fortress in half an A press for the IL sheet, because you can't unlock the owl until after you've already gotten top of the fortress, so it wouldn't actually be save an A press or anything, so it can't go on the IL sheet. That's the main one. There's some other ones like, the shell and lethal lava land, stuff like that. But other than that, pretty much everything goes for the most part. But yeah, any questions about the challenge, you could just ask the Discord and I'll try to answer it. Alright, I think that's the meta stuff. Time for the actual movement. Yeah, most common movement throughout the challenge is the dive, followed by a rollout. You use B to do both of them. Yeah, you're basically going to be, for all movement, unless you're doing a trick or something to get over a ledge, you're basically just going to be doing this the entire time to, get around. The maximum distance a rollout can make is just about the height of this platform. So, a little bit above Mario's model. Let me try and get it. Yeah. I got it there once. It can be a lot harder than that, especially since, you can't ledge grab or anything, so oftentimes it is... I'm not really getting across how precise it is, but there are some cases, like with entering SL or TTM or Peach's Secret Slide, where you have to do a DR like this, and it's really annoying to do, so keep that in mind. It's just you gotta get good spacing. If you want to get the maximum distance from a rollout, like if you're trying to cross a big gap, there's two things you want to note. One, if you're ever on the ground, you'll see Mario makes dust, whereas if you get really good rollouts, a really good rollout doesn't get any dust. That's a first frame rollout. I kind of call it a firsty in an RTABC setting, but that's just confusing. So people usually just call it dustless rollouts from my experience. Yeah, you could use that to get maximum speed. If you really want to maximize distance, you don't want to just dive roll out to cross a specific gap. You want to do 2 dives and 2 rollouts. Because if you do dive roll out, and those are first frame rollouts, both of them, that final rollout is basically just going to maximize the distance you can get from... Yeah, that's basically just going to maximize the distance you can get from a rollout. So keep that in mind, make dust. The main disadvantage of a rollout, especially the second variation, is that you need a ton of space in order to do it. And sometimes you're going to be in small areas where you don't really have a ton of space to do a rollout like that. So there's 2 special variations of rollouts that you can do in small spaces. The first one is the edge DR. It's mostly used for if you're on a platform that has a star on it and you need to collect the star. This is a pretty good way of doing it. How it works, it looks like that. How you do it is this is a pretty good distance. First, you run away from the edge, a decent amount, about this far. You can maybe go a little bit further than this and still be good. And then you turn around. While Mario is in this little turnaround animation, you hold the joystick the other direction. And what that does is that when he gets out of the turnaround animation, he'll be facing the direction that you pointed the joystick, but he'll have backward speed. He'll still have the speed from when he did the turnaround. Yeah, this is a double turnaround. And then when you do that, is that once you fall off the platform, you're airborne and you're facing the edge, which means that you could just do a dive rollout, and yeah, unless you do a rollout in a pretty enclosed space. If you really want to because that specific edge DR I did, oh yeah, for reference, rollout, dive, the thing after dive where you do the rollout, so dive rollout, It's either called a rollout, dive recover, or dive recover is often shortened to DR. Just in case you didn't know the lingo. Yeah, if you want to maximize the distance away from the edge you can get, you want to have as little speed as possible when you run off the edge. So like if you just barely, let me try and get a good one. That one was pretty good. You could see you get a lot further away from the edge. Whereas if you just do like, if you just do one where like Mario like just barely falls off the edge, you don't get like nearly, you don't get as far. It might not seem like a big difference, but depending on how the star is positioned, definitely can make a difference. The other type of rollout that's good in a closed space is like a rollout from an unreferenced wall. There's, I don't think there's really a name for it specifically, but oftentimes when there's two walls, one of the walls Mario will be able to actually push up against, and the other wall Mario will just be able to run in place. And Mario is actually building up his speed here to the point where you can actually do a rollout. This is usually good if you're trying to get up next to like a ledge and you're in like a really small spot. A good example for this is climbing the steps at the end of iRock. There's a few other places you can do it too. It's really good because you can get the height of a rollout and there's absolutely, like, you don't have to move at all. You can just stand in one spot. There's a few places you want to do it. Oh, also for reference, if you're trying to do a rollout, you need a decent amount of speed. If you don't have a ton of speed, Mario will just punch, and that's like really annoying. Especially annoying when you're like going from a standstill and you're like, okay, we're gonna go fast, and then you just punch instead of doing a dive. Can really ruin the immersion. So yeah, just look out for that. Sometimes you need to be running for more than it really feels like you need to, but that's a thing. So, I think that's everything about rollouts I really wanted to talk about. Yeah. Alright. Then, next main form of movement is slide kicking. Yeah. Started with, people don't really think about this very often, like if they're just like trying the challenge for themselves, but it's actually pretty useful. It's kind of underrated. Yeah. Run forward, press Z. You need a decent amount of... You actually can start a slide kick from not a ton of speed. Like, it's pretty... Like, you can do it pretty... from, like, a standstill. The less advantage of the slide kick is not so much the slide kick itself, but after it, you hit the ground, you could do this bounce. And a lot of time, this bounce, it's really useful if you're trying to cross a lot of distance, or if you have like a height advantage. Like if you're trying to get somewhere that's lower than you and you have a height advantage, it can be really good. Start of HMC is a good example, although that's like pretty hard to do RTA and not really necessary. Getting these coins is a good example, because if you just like land on this platform, kind of hard to land on the platform. Like if you're on this platform and you're trying to go backwards, which is actually like the optimal routing, you don't really have enough speed to get a good rollout, and like a dive just like doesn't really get the distance you want. So what you can do is, it's kind of hard to get because of the thing going up and down, but yeah, you do a slide kick onto this platform and then you hold straight up. And that was like really bad. Like you could see I had like almost no speed by the time I hit that plank. It was actually like, I'm kind of surprised this ended up working, but yeah. It can give you a lot of distance and height, provided you already have a lot of height to work with. So it's good for extending. And then from here you can just do a rollout. Yeah, that's the main use. It's also useful because if you're in Lethal Lava Land or Fire Sea, then the slide kick bounce goes across lava, so it's used a lot in those stages as like a way to make the movement a little bit better. But yeah, Slidekick, good for if you want a lot of distance or speed, provided you have a height advantage. Oh. Minor thing I want to point out, sometimes when Mario is doing like a type of slide on the floor, it can sometimes take a really annoying amount of time to actually get out of it. Like, the meta for getting out of it as quickly as possible is pretty much always just to hold backwards, so you want Mario to go as slow as possible. But yeah, just be warned that sometimes Mario can be sliding for what seems like an unreasonable amount of time. And normally it isn't so much of an issue because you can always, jump out of it, like if you're doing a belly slide. Or you could do a Slidekick rollout. But the problem is both of those require A. So, like, yeah. You pretty much always just have to wait out the slide, and it can be really annoying. Especially in Snowman's Land. It has a lot of really shallow slopes. Yeah, that's pretty much everything about slide kicks. Next thing I want to point out is sort of the usefulness of being in Freefall. So, two important actions that are sort of difficult to actually achieve in ABC is ground pounding and doing a ledge grab. Because, you can't ledge grab, you can't do either of them from a rollout, and you need to be airborne to do both of them. So the main way you get around them is you try and find a way to beat Freefall. Most common way to get into Freefall is just like run off. Well, there is annoying because there was a slope there, but most common way is to just run off a platform. If you run off, then you're in Freefall, and then you can ground pound. Yeah. If you need to... Oh, and related to ground pounding and ledge grabbing. If you start a slide kick from high enough above the ground, and you do it long enough, you are slide kicking for long enough and you're a high enough distance above the ground, Mario will actually enter free fall, and then from here you can either ledge grab or do a ground pound. It's another useful state to be in. But yeah, getting into free fall is basically the only way you have of doing a ground pound or a ledge grab. So for blue coin switches or other scenarios like King Womp and stuff, that's a thing you want to be able to look out for. See if you can. You got to figure out a way to get into free fall, and then you can do it. Yeah. Oh, also free fall is maintained by bouncing on enemies, so it's kind of hard to illustrate here. Like, one way that's confusing about it is that if you jump off an enemy like this, you look like you're in free fall. This looks visually like basically identical to being in free fall, but you can't it still doesn't count. But for example, you can, if you free fall onto a Goomba, then you can, or other enemy, then you can ground pound. So yeah. Useful knowledge about when you're able to ground pound. Next thing I want to point out is how swimming works. So just by default, if you're not able to hold A at all, the fastest you can swim is just punching forward like this. This is the fastest you got. You thought swimming was annoying before. You haven't seen nothing yet. Yeah, it's really slow. It's also really kind of annoying because you need to you need to just punch perfectly. Some people decide to spam it. Some people just try to time it. I try and time it. Some people spam it. But yeah, if you have the option, in a full game run or a stage setting, or basically if you have any opportunity to hold A before entering the water, you want to do it. Because then you do this flutter kicking. It's a lot faster. It's also just a lot less exhausting because you don't have to constantly mash B. Yeah, that's pretty much. Oh, also note about B swimming is that it's slow enough to the point where in JRB, not so much in DDD, but in JRB, it's actually faster to use the shell instead of B swimming. Even the TAS uses the shell because this swimming is just so slow. Although TAS has a way to make it a little bit faster. Yeah. So speaking of holding down A, we should talk about half A press. For reference, there's like two ways that half A press is used. Either it's used to describe a star where holding A is sort of needed to complete the star, but not actually pressing A. The idea is that if you have the A button pressed from like a previous level or a previous star, you can just hold that A button down all the way until the star that just needs A held, and then you can do it. Yeah, A held, it's good for swimming faster. It's good for twirling slower, like from a spin drift or a tornado. It's good for falling down slower with the wing cap, which is really good for Bob on Battlefield. And it lets you do these little kicks. They're kind of good in the sense that it can give you like a little bit of height from just an absolute standstill, like anywhere. So they're kind of good for that. The downside of holding A, aside from there's really two downsides of holding A. Sorry, my air conditioning just went on. There's really two downsides of holding A. A is the first one is the fact that if you have to do it for a really long time, like in Dire Docks or Dire Docks is the main one. It can get really kind of surprisingly tiring to keep that button held for that long. Like, you can't let go of it once for potentially up to like half an hour or something. Or maybe even longer than that, depending on what you're doing. And sometimes if you have like a sketchy controller, it'll like drop an input for a second, and that'll like basically register you as pressing A again. As it won't communicate that you're pressing A that one frame, so the game will think you're letting go of A and pressing it again. So that's kind of annoying. Look out for that if you're doing something really long or involving A held. Second disadvantage is that you can't punch. Like, it just overrides the punch. And that kind of ruins... It ruins cloning, really. It also makes it so that you can't grab a lot of objects from a standstill. Some objects you can get around with it by doing a dive grab into them instead of just a punch grab. But there are, in fact, some scenarios where you physically cannot have A held, and it's mostly for grabbing objects. It's mostly for being able to punch instead of being able to kick. So that's half A press. Next thing, the last really big thing is going to touch on framewalking for a little bit. Yeah. I personally think people make framewalking out to be a lot harder than it is. Like, if you hear people running 120 complaining about like this particular framewalk, or like if you hear about TAS framewalking where it's like absolutely frame perfect, you might think it's like really hard, but I think people make it out to be harder than it really is. So we'll have a demonstration here. So for reference, what framewalking is, if you don't know, there are a lot of slopes in the game where, like, if you try to just walk up them, Mario just falls back down. Like, you just try to go up and go back down. And there's a surprising amount of these if you, like, know how to look out for them. Like, there's a ton, and they're really useful for RTABC. Because they let you get up they let you go around a lot of platforming by being able to just walk up, like, walls instead. So the idea is for framewalking is that you get on a slope, you let go of the joystick. You can't. If you try to start the framewalk and you just slide back down immediately, like, I don't know, hard to get it. Yeah, that means you had too much speed when you attempted the framewalk. You got to hold up for a little bit longer. So the idea is once Mario slows down, you hold neutral on the joystick. You just let go of it. And then you hold up again. And the idea is that if you do this a lot of times, then Mario actually can climb up a lot of these slopes. Because the act of Mario not holding the joystick to holding up on the joystick gives him a little bit of speed boost. And on certain types of surfaces, it doesn't work for all slopes. That's actually enough to let you walk up them. And some slopes you can walk up of, like, this one's a good example. You can walk up some slopes that are really steep. Like, look at this. I get the star grab? No. But yeah. Well, okay. So, yeah. The way I'm doing it with control... So the way people think about Framewalk, there's a lot of easy ways to do it. Because it's... A lot of people get really intimidated for it. So, first thing to note, if you're playing on a keyboard, it's really easy. You just, like, tap the W button or whatever you have forward bound to over and over again, and it's, like, really easy. I think the mistake people tend to make when trying to Framewalk is thinking that you have to go faster than you really need to. Like, you can go, like, super slow and still Framewalk. Like, look at this. I'm like you can, like, I'm holding forward, like, 4 times a second. Like, this is not a huge... Like, this is not very difficult. Like, a lot of times you see people just being like... And it's just hard to... They think it's like you have to press A at the speed you need to do a backwards long jump, when you really don't need to do it very fast. If this is too uncomfortable, if you like try it and you're like, I don't want to have to worry about this, especially since there are certain Framewalks, like in TTM and Bows in the Dark World, where like if you mess up the Framewalk, you like lose an A press or die or have to do a really annoying trick over again. If you're on a controller and you just want to do it, the best way to do it is by pause buffering. A lot of different runners for RTABC pause buffer different amounts, just in general, not just for Framewalking. I tend to pause buffer like the most of any runner. Like I probably overdo it, but yeah, it's really good if you wanna like, you know, take it slow. If you're trying to do something really complicated, it's good to, you know, take it slow. Pause buffer a little bit so it's easier. Because it's not a speed run, so as Bismuth would say, time is very much a secondary concern. But yeah. It's also, occasionally it's useful because it lets you mash slightly faster, but I'm not going to really go into that now. Like, there are some occasions where it's actually, like, required to pause buffer. Yeah. If you want a Framewalk easier, you pause buffer it by you hold forward on the slope, pause the game, let go of the joystick, unpause pause, hold up on the joystick, unpause pause, release, unpause pause, and repeat. And it's really tedious and it's really slow. But if you want a version of Framewalking where it's like, there's no chance you will mess it up if you're paying attention, then this is what you do. Again, if you're on a joystick. If you're on a keyboard, you can do it a lot easier. That's pretty much Framewalking, and yeah, you can do it on a surprising amount of slopes. Like this, well, I think this one might be, yeah, you could just do it a lot of, any place where it's like, looks so vertical, but isn't quite vertical is a floor and not a wall, and if it is that, you can Framewalk up it. It's kind of insane. You want to get good at Framewalking because there's a lot of scenarios where it's used, and it's just a cool movement option to have and be good at. Those are all the main things I want to talk about. A couple things have to do with if you're doing actual A presses, just like really minor things. So there's a single jump you can do, and then there's a double jump you could do, and the double jump gives you a significant amount more height. Just the thing you might want to mention, you might think double jump you have to press A twice in order to do it, because it is double. But you can actually do it pretty easily with just one. Either you can have A held, kick jump, and kick jump gives you a double jump, if you want that. Or, and this is sort of the more common case, you get into Freefall, and then if you jump out of a Freefall, it's a double jump. And the double jump is mostly useful if you have somewhere where it's a ton of speed, because the faster you go, the more speed you get, like slightly. It's not a huge difference, but for some places like the wall jump in TikTok Clock, just it can definitely make a difference. If you're just standing about and you want to get height to pass an obstacle, you generally side flip. Like, the side flip is the most common, like, form of actual platforming A-press you're going to use. Just because of how high it gets and how easy it is to do. Plus you can ledge grab out of it, which is nice. Another minor thing I want to point out, if you're twirling, and this is why I have the CCM save here. Which one is it? Yeah. So if you're twirling, and I started this twirled with a rollout, so I started it with a lot of speed. When you're twirling and you move the joystick, Mario has like a maximum twirling speed he'll go at. So, and sometimes this isn't like fast enough. Either you want to twirl like a big distance, like this wasn't a great attempt, but you could see like that twirl made it nowhere close enough to getting that star. There's a couple ways to extend the twirl and make your twirls better. Partly is if you hold down the A button, then you twirl a lot slower. So like slow twirl, no A held, no A held. It's kind of hard to notice, but it does make a really big difference. And yeah. Second thing to maximize your twirling is if you start a twirl with a lot of speed, like speed above your maximum twirling speed, then if you start holding the joystick at all, like even if it's in the direction you're actually traveling, Mario will slow down, and he'll slow down like extremely quickly. Like neutral, like he slows down so quick, even if it's in the direction you're going. So what you want to do is, if you start a twirl with a lot of speed like I have here, just hold neutral, and you can't really turn in the state, but Mario keeps a lot of his good twirling speed. Really useful in Snowman's Land and Shifting Sandland. Those are like the main twirling courses. Think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in like the beginner tutorial. Yeah. Next tutorial is going to be, more technical things, cloning, DSC, the Hulk, all that good stuff. Just like, yeah. Planning on also following this up with a bunch of stage tutorials, so those will be good if you want more info. But yeah, this should be all you need to just sort of do general movement around the game. And yeah, just have fun with it. A lot of individual stars have some, like, probably, like, I'd say, like, at least a third of the ILs have some strats, which are, like, pretty crazy. But you can do a decent amount of the stars in this game just with what I've told you here. Like, CCM, it's a good one. CCM is a really good stage to start off with. JRB isn't too bad. SL ain't too bad. TTM has this one annoying rollout, but other than that, it's a pretty good stage to start out with as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Alright, thanks for watching. Tell me if I missed anything, because I probably did. I tried to go really fast, and even with that, it still ended up taking an hour. But alright. Have fun. Thanks for watching.